right, welcome everybody. Glad to have you again. This is episode 5. Going to talk a little bit about the cloud. One of my favorite conversations, as many of you know already. So we're going to just kind of go through the basics of it and then open it up for some questions and things. I know I've got one or two friends on here already, John and Sharak, that are very fluent in cloud in themselves and have played around with it and have been working in it for quite a while. So we'll just kind of go over the basics and kind of open if you got questions or something like that as I go through it, then feel free to jump in and say hey. So the big question that we're having and finding out when we're talking to our clients about cloud and things is, one is, where are the limitations in cloud and where's the limitations in hardware? So those are two different things that we figured out, that everything is kind of built on. When you buy a switcher, you buy a router, you buy anything, it's how many inputs do I need, how many outputs do I need, and then that price is what you pay for those capabilities. It's a little bit different in the cloud because you have scalability and you can actually bring those inputs to many more times and spread out quite a bit more also whenever the needs are there. Scalability being not just on the input side, but also on the output side, especially. That's where we've leveraged it the most. It's because we can go up with one or two or three signals and then use the cloud as our master control to switch out to multiple locations and destinations. So there are differences in the clouds systems that are out there. The big three, I guess you would call them now, the three. Top of the heap, without a doubt, is Amazon AWS. The right behind them probably would be Google, the Google Cloud Platform, and then Microsoft Azure is still there. I don't know many people that use it in our space, in the media and entertainment space, but they're still there. There's some small players, DigitalOcean, Vulture, and a little one called Paperspace. That is a great way to just get started at a very, very cheap way. But it doesn't have all the capabilities that are built into Amazon or Google Cloud that allow you to bridge multiple machines together in the same virtual private network like you can in Amazon, especially called the VPC. Um, the big part that really kind of made all this start working with everything that we've started doing in the past 5 years is really NDI in the cloud. Is what really makes things work. The ability, just like you can on your local network, to be able to pick up a video output of any computer or a source that is coming into the system and be able to see that across the network. It's just an amazing thing to be able to use NDI like that without having to worry about, is the network stack adequate, other than you can't use multicast, but you find that out pretty soon. You have an NDI discovery server, you put that in the cloud, and then everything can talk to it. They know where the sources are and where the outputs are. But the big key is you don't use multicast in the cloud because you don't have control of those network devices that are there, the network switches and such. There is other cloud options and solutions that are out there too that are a little bit more targeted at, I would say, the getting started or those that have less needs. So you don't have to be building something. You don't have to be a true cloud aficionado, somebody that really knows it inside and out. And those services are like StreamYard or Restream, which also has a very similar stack now with the multiple inputs and the ability to produce a show off of that. Showflow Studio was one that came out just right before they were acquired. Grabyo has done very well, and Telio is another one that has done very well at pushing their ecosystem forward. So it's not a, let me build a system, run vmix, run vector plus or whatever, but it's more or less you use their approach, but it is cloud based. Grass Valley Amp is kind of its own critter. It is building its own infrastructure using the Grass Valley ecosystem that they developed called AMP. And it's heavy. It's very heavy on the cost also. A lot of times you have to run that at really powerful instances, which is the computers themselves, the virtual machines. And it's very costly to do that because they're going bare metal. They want basically the equivalent of their own machine instead of virtualizations like so many other products are using. And then there is Sony, believe it or not. They have something out there. Nobody uses it, so I'm sure it's great. But it's Sony, and I never ran into a client that used it ever. I think they have them on their website, but like two or three of them, but they're mostly targeted towards the editing side. And then some of our friends that's here, actually, VizRT with Vector Plus and now the VizNow platform. And very soon, if not already, really hitting the streets is the new TriCaster Now platform, which is in their cloud. So instead of VizNow, which is deployed in your own AWS or your own GCP infrastructure, and you basically control that machine on and off, and you have to have more capabilities, let me put it that way. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to be super great at cloud, but you do have to have a little bit more, I guess, a little bit more knowledge. The TriCaster Now is spin it up in their cloud platform, and then it's ticked off on a number of hours that you use. And how that's done is limited inputs in and out also, so it's not quite as large as a product as, say, VizVector Plus, but a lot of scalability capabilities that are coming in that route, definitely targeted at the simpler market. Some of the solutions, some of the software we moved to the cloud. Livestream Studio was actually the very first one that I did, because I used to use Livestream Studio quite a bit, and then vMix right behind that. Behind that was the NewTek VMC, way back when, quite a while back. And then the Sienna processing engine and Sienna NDI router, and well, the whole suite of Sienna. There's about 6 or 7 different products that they have now. As I became a reseller with Sienna, it really sucked me into the cloud pretty heavy because they're really targeted at that. The other things that we've done in our cloud that we've used quite a bit is graphic software like CharacterWorks, Expression from Ross. Not officially, but I was able to make it work. And then New Blue Effects, which is now been up there quite a bit. Singular Live, which is an online cloud service, which Singular or Flowix, either one. Flowix is now owned by VizRT. Excuse me just a second, didn't silence that. But Flowix is a graphics processing software that is to create character generator that can create great graphics, and it's in HTML5 format, just like Singular. But they're running in their own cloud, and then you're attaching it into your cloud production by using HTML5, which any machine that's on the internet can see for the most part. So our number one advantages of cloud production, and you can shake your head if you agree or not, is nearly unlimited internet connectivity. I mean, it's just like, that is the internet. That's the whole point of having that. So redundancy options, we can spread out those pieces that we're doing production in all over the world. We could be close to, if we're doing something in Dubai, we could be close to it. If we're doing something in India, we could be close to it. In the physical sense, there's latency involved just because of physicality, that we go across from the East Coast to the West Coast here in the US. Then if that's the case, there's just time. It's physics. So we can't get any faster than that. But if we can if we have people that are doing control and they're in the West Coast, but our resources are all on the East Coast, we're adding more latency to what they can experience in the multi-viewers, and they're just pressing a button how long it's going to happen. It's easier to move our production into the West Coast and have all our operators in the West Coast than it is to be able to go back and forth. It's not the end of the world, because I have done things across to Dubai from here in Texas, and we had services that were in India because we had to move things around at the last minute. So there are times that we have to just do wherever we are is wherever we are. But if you can relocate to something that's closer, it's definitely better. Then you also can have location independent resources too. So there are certain areas, like for instance in Bahrain, it was very hard to get GeForce there at the very first that we started doing cloud there with the client. So we had to use other areas in order to do. And then they start now. I don't even think they have G5 still. So I'm sorry, those are different types of instances, different types of computers that are in the AWS world. So we have to kind of juggle what is available at different places. The biggest thing that I like about it, besides the ability to really scale, is I one event I use this story is like one event we were doing. We were asked to provide 30 different Zoom meetings, and so we virtualized those and virtualized 30 different computers. We fed them all from one Sienna processing engine, so we could feed hundreds, literally. At the last minute, the client was they were having a hurricane come in, and they went to the client was like, well, what happens if we lose power? It's like, well, we're not going to lose power in the cloud, so we're still have a signal. You have a live view from us, so you're still going to have a signal from us. You just walk outside and start talking. It's fine. If the power's out in the building, doesn't matter. Just walk outside with a microphone and a camera into that live view, and let's keep going. He goes, well, what about the other people that are using our machines here? It's like, well, would you like us to spin that up? This is the day before the show. And it's like, we could build you 30 more machines to cover you. It's 30 and 30. And we were able to do that within that period of time. I could not have gone to Best Buy and purchased 30 machines to do a farm of Zoom machines or anything like that. So it really made the most sense to be able to do it all in the cloud at that point. And so from that point on, that was kind of our models. Like we're your last ditch effort of backing you up. So let us just do that for you. And we try to build that into our build cost. There are some disadvantages of cloud production. Long term, you really have to weigh whether or not that cloud costs and hardware costs are going to be comparable. The biggest thing about cloud is it's really great for burst. It's really good for large expansion, like I just described, but it also can hurt you if you're running 24/7, because your costs are just going to continue to mount. You're using somebody else's computer. That's basically what you're doing. So they're charging you rent for it. And as it becomes more and more, you start thinking about, it's like, well, I could just put this in my server room and just host my own machine to do that if it's one or two. Now, if you're doing 50, that's different. 100, it's different. Or if you don't have the bandwidth up and down to be able to handle that many machines running, that many servers. So those are things you have to really kind of to do a cost analysis on, is whether or not long term is it worth this way. Now there's that capex thing, opex thing. So capital expenditures or operation expenses. Operation expenses, sometimes that's better because you can just send that to the bill, and you're just billing the client for whatever you use. Where in capex, you kind of have to figure out the amortization of it. You got to figure out, was this my daily rate that I want for it, or whatever you're having to do. It's a lot easier in cloud because what you paid is what you paid, and you can mark it up however you want to mark it up. So those are things you have to kind of weigh. And that's the disadvantages of the cloud on 24/7, is where it really kind of shows you, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that. My biggest mistake was leaving on I was going to run comms in the cloud on a Unity Intercom comms, and I was running it on a instance that was brand new to AWS, and it was the Mac Mini instance. I could have bought 3 Mac Minis before I turned it off the next month, because that's how much it was marked up considerably. Now, the rest of the PCs that are in the Linux machines and stuff that we use in the cloud are nowhere near as expensive. But there's some other, I guess you'd say, requirements that the Mac Mini has to run off of a reserved instance and things like that. And so luckily AWS worked with me, and that's one reason I stick with them, is because they worked with me and were backed out those costs that were just not really 100% in front. So but their costs have not gone down on those little Mac Minis either. So you got to look at that. The other side on the disadvantages is latency. Your GUI and your inputs and outputs, you're always going to have latency. There's no way around it. You do everything you can do to minimize it, of course. But if you can make it smaller, like I said, by locating your cloud services by you, then all the better for it. Controllers on the cloud, to the cloud is also another bit of a challenge, a little bit of disadvantage. Just like we're used to, if you got a computer in front of you or a server in front of you, just plug the USB in or maybe put it on the network now. And it just works and it's simple. As we found out with one of our friends here on the Discord, uh, it's not that simple sometimes. So we have to juggle a few more things, work around things like USB, FlexiHub, TGX, and a few of the actual remote control softwares allow you to do USB transport. But I try to stay away from that as much as possible. My go-to, without a doubt, is either the Central Control software from Jotamax, centralcontrol.io, or my guy at Scarhoy, which is my favorite little blue boxes now. And so I use the Scarhoy boxes because they're natively IP addressed and I can get onto a network and then hop across a VPN and have control without having to worry about a USB sending too much data or not making a connection or anything. So those are kind of the hardware side of control. There's a lot of different options out there, but it's a little bit harder to. So I looked at as a disadvantage. Another is the training in this. We're still new to it all. So there's a lot of things that we're doing out there that are maybe not as efficient. I think probably one of the most efficient is Chirac and his buddy Jonas. That Jonas has been around here too, running scripts and making a lot of the work happen automatically. That this is definitely the future, and it's how you can be a lot more efficient. But it takes a bit more to work out all those details. So you have to put in the time. Uh, it's it's just one of those things. So training people that understand cloud or understand cloud production in general, I'm finding it harder and harder to find those people or interested in it for that matter. You can find people that want to do a database in the cloud in a heartbeat, but doing the other fun stuff that we do is it's been a lot harder. Um, I'm still trying to teach my guys, and it's hard to get a spark behind them as much as I have the fire behind me. I enjoy it. I love it. And I've also noticed that people in the business too uh, don't necessarily always think the same way we do. That we've been deep into the cloud. I have a really good friend does a lot of big production stuff, and I was just like, why don't you just do this in the cloud? Why don't you just do this remotely? It's like, well, the client wants us to be there. And that was just the bottom line is the client, it was, they wanted them to be there. They felt strength in numbers, I guess. It's like, everybody's here. It's like, yeah, we're all in the cloud too, but we're just, not looking at your face. So they like that FaceTime still. And I think that's something to just eventually be overcame. And it's something to overcome in time. So let's talk about getting content to the cloud and away from the cloud. Probably the most popular, SRT. It was a game changer. It's easy to implement. There's a lot of encoders out there that are inexpensive and expensive both. Right behind that for sports and definitely news or contribution organizations that have the budget is a LiveU set up because they do have the LU4000 in server in the cloud to receive. And then there are other kind of like SRT, but not necessarily like MediaLux. It does use either WebRTC or SRT, and then Bird Dog Cloud, same thing. It's SRT, or I think they're still playing around with WebRTC. I haven't touched it in a long time. NDI Cloud is one that I use a lot because of NDI. That was the first thing I used from Ciena, and so now it's called Ciena Cloud because naming convention stuff that they had to change. But it allows you to do multiple channels up and multiple channels down in just between two boxes. So that server setup, it works really well for us when we're bringing multiple signals up and we need them in sync. Which when we were doing sports and such, that's how we were keeping 6 or 7 different channels going up and then a couple return channels coming back down. It's a two-way communication between that, and it doesn't use SRT. It uses their own format, their own mezzanine in the background to do the compression. So it's very light compression, but you do have to have the bandwidth and you have to have the chops to set it up. That's a little bit harder than plug it in SRT, put it in a port, or live view, just turn it on. I find live view is without a doubt the easiest way to get content to the cloud. It just works. Um, Other things that you need to do if you're doing cloud production or remote production in general, but cloud production, I find I got to have more monitors for some reason. I just keep adding more and more monitors to my desk. I have a whole master control setup. It's just we never had enough monitors. We have so many. How many computers you expect you to have in the cloud? Is like you want to be able to see them, and so that's always a challenge. And then you have to have efficient ways to control all those virtual machines. So that leads keyboard, mouse, besides the other control hardware. And then the software side, Teradici was kind of like the go-to for a while for me. They got bought out and didn't do so well after that. I moved to TeamViewer is something I've always used in my back pocket with AnyDesk or Splashtop as backups on them. I no longer use TeamViewer. Now I'm going to Splashtop and Parsec for the really big systems that like the video mixing systems. If I want faster video, I want higher quality previews and such, then I'll use Parsec. Nice DCV, if on AWS, because they own Nice. That is another great remote control software just to get things started running. After that, though, we're finding though that most of the time we don't need access to the GUIs on these softwares. We do it all on the back end, and it may be command line, or it could be just using the hardware itself to do things that we need to do. My biggest, as Josh just said, is like my biggest advantage I have is I have a 43-inch 4K display on my desk, and it'll break up into 4 different 1080s if I have 4 different machines here. But I find that the 4K display with something larger like this, it allows me to be able to see multiple machines, and I can just window them out to 1080, the equivalent of a 1080, and be able to see multiple machines at once. So that's kind of my go-to. The the biggest thing I found though is multiple monitor support, as we're used to it in the on-prem world. That is it's still a little bit harder to implement. But as I was saying, I'm finding more of us are building out multi-views, or just what the technical director needs to see, or just what the producer needs to see, and then linking a Stream Deck to it, or through Central Control or Companion, which I didn't mention earlier, is another remote software that we use to remotely control, or the Scarhoy controllers, whatever. But those are how we're controlling things. We're finding it we don't need to give everybody all access to the software. At first, when we started in cloud, that's what we did. Everybody got to see, everybody got into TeamViewer, and it made it simpler as we're going with building out things. It's simpler just to give them just what they need and what they expect, instead of access to the whole machine. So that I found that was a lot more reliable. So that was kind of the general layout of what we're talking about, the basics of it. Just looking over some of the questions and inputs. I know, let's open up with, I know we had a question earlier from Bo, I believe it was, regarding HTML graphics. No 3D. That's my biggest. So Flowix or Singular, they're 2D. So they're very simple simple flat graphics. In multi-layers, no issues there, but it's just very basic in comparison to some of the stuff I could do with either Expression or Chiron or the guys at CharacterWorks, if you really got the chops to do it. So that's kind of where we're laying on most of the on the graphic side of HTML5. Just, and data's still a little challenging on some of those platforms. For Flowix, it took me a long time to get some of the things to work in it, whereas in Singular it was really easy. And then the next time I came back to it, Flowix has built up a whole bunch of data interfaces too. So that's where we kind of ended up with Flowix in our workflows. Also helps that they were a VizRT company, so it was easy to get into with us as already a partner. Let's see what else. All right, question: how long before the EIC is a programmer? Who's updating cloud for me? That's already happening. Yeah. that's that's what I'm finding more and more. It's happening every day now. So um yeah, you just update and build another machine instead of throwing another machine in the rack to solve the problem. Absolutely is what's happening. I do that almost every week with something, like, oh, well, we need to do this we need to show a PowerPoint. Okay. I don't try to do, I think that's what another thing too, especially in the vMix world, that a lot of operators are like, they're running Zoom, they're running vMix just because they can, doesn't mean they should. And running 3 or 4 different programs on one machine, it's in the cloud. It's, to me, it's just easy. I just start another machine, and then that way I have everything broken apart in different pieces without having to worry about, am I going to crash this machine, am I going to run out of resources or whatever. So definitely on that side. Let's see, I hate doing questions to text. If you got a question, just jump in if you can, if you have some time.
Hey, I got a question. What interfaces are you building? I put it in the chat for the clients to directly control, or are you doing some obfuscation for that? For example, slide control or chat moderation.
Well, chat moderation is one of those really weird. I personally been the few corporate events where we had to integrate that, I was using Restream, and it actually brings multiple people, multiple different chats, multiple different locations, so you could do YouTube, Twitch, whatever, all into the Restream, and then use the Restream interface to do that moderation. I don't do a whole lot of those, so maybe someone else might have a little bit more experience in that too. Josh, on the side of the interface itself, whenever I'm thinking interfaces, I'm building a multi-viewers. I'm probably building it now more commonly in my VCOM software. So that VCOM window that pops up has HTML capabilities embeds in there, and then the multi-viewers are in those embeds. So I could see multiple video, I could spawn multiple video sources off my VCOM panel. So then they're only what I give those users. So I'm using the VCOM layer to control who gets to see what, and then they could see program video, they could see the multi-viewer of everything. If like a ESE, I would have them with every source possible, and then a technical director might have just the sources he needs to switch, and then the producer would only get to see the top level sources. He doesn't need to see the ME previews and things like that necessarily. So most of all those are multi-views built out, and then the next step would be the comm side of that, like I said, is on the top layer of every bit of that. So all the different channels that they could talk to in the comm so they could communicate. And then the control layer, which is a distributed profile for Stream Deck, because they are so inexpensive, or Cinema Stream Deck if they don't have one already, especially remote directors that we've worked with. They already have Stream Decks. So we just send them a profile that then points back to our sources over HTML, so they can trigger everything where it's talking to a port. If we're doing through Companion, if they have to install Companion, it's a whole Companion build at that point in time.
When do you decide to use like a Scarhoy instead of a Stream Deck?
I would use a Scarhoy every time if I can. But not everybody has them. For
It's
me,
more about
that's,
price thing.
yeah, it is definitely the reason for the, honestly, no, I take that back, Nate. I probably use Central Control more than I use the Scarhoist now. I find with the Joe software, it's just a lot easier to punch in the port and get into. I need to go add a software or add a server. It's faster for me to do that in Central Control than it is with the Scarhoy. Whether you're using Unisketch on the Scarhoy or a Reactor, either one, it's just faster for me to do the same thing in Central Control, and that's just kind of how we've found that works the best. Let's see what else.
Are you using central control with the Stream Decks, or are you using something like a TOST or a old
All the above.
TriCaster controller?
I have like 8 TriCaster controllers here.
Okay.
So, like, what size do you want? Yeah, so I have plenty of them, and so I use all of those. But the TIS controller, we have one of the 2 of the 1500s. We bought those right at the end of the last season, and moved to those just for size. They work okay. They're not great, but they're better than Stream Decks. I personally don't like Stream Deck buttons. That's my biggest issue.
It doesn't have the broadcast feel. But yeah.
Yeah, they don't have enough travel in them, and I find that whenever I'm switching with Stream Decks, if I'm trying to switch video with Stream Decks, I'll make more mistakes because the buttons just don't feel right. And
I've
honestly,
double punched on those a few times.
yeah,
So.
that's exactly what was happening with us. And honestly,
same with the A10 Mini stuff.
Yep.
Has the same problem with their buttons.
and like on this, I don't have a master key with me right now, but like these soft buttons that Scorhoy has, that's another reason why I was probably leaning more towards using central control and the TriCaster hardware, because I'm very, very used to the TriCaster hardware. Yeah, so
I blew the money on the master key, which does have the real buttons, but it cost way more.
Yeah, and it was before really Joe really had a lot of support also too, is whenever I bought our master keys. And since then I've sold them to clients because they liked them and they like the workflow with them. And they're happy. So it just depends. For me, on my desk, I would probably say I reach for a what is that? A XD 850. So it's a TriCaster 850 panel. That's my go-to if I want to switch something on the desk, because I know it's just natural feel. But that's probably it. And then on the Stream Decks, when we do use Stream Decks, actually I use them through central control more so than I do directly out of this. I hardly ever use the Stream Deck software at all, except for like desk stuff. That's it. And it's always going through central control. And then there's a few pieces in that I have to use companion. For instance, our TF rack or Yamaha TF racks. They don't, Joe doesn't have a way of talking to them yet. So I have to use central control talking to companion that talks to that. So it's good that he was able to write that in. Mac Stadium. Oh yeah, that was the other one, Bo. Mac Stadium is priced more reasonably for hosting a single Unity server. Yes, the only problem I have with that is I can't use any of that audio in and out easily into my Amazon VPC infrastructure. So that's why I hardly ever think about Mac Stadium anymore. I would just I want all, and I'm honestly I've got away from using Unity. Our machine's on. I haven't used it in months. But I'm using VCOM for everything now for comms related stuff, because VCOM allows me to do NDI audio in and out, and also has that video preview capability, like I said, to spawn different video views on that. And so that's where I ended up running away from Mac Stadium. I did have a system there for a few months, but I stopped it.
Does VCOM have like phone apps for Android and iPhone, or?
Yeah, and a little bit further from that too is it uses WebRTC, so you can send the video can go through into the phone, and then also it's has the capability of doing true phone. So and that's another reason I'm tying into MCRs or other companies' comm systems using a SIP line. So it's voice over IP, and you can actually just dial straight out of the server. And so if there's a button, you press the button and it pops up a dollar. You type in the number anywhere in the world, and I can dial it straight off using my voice over IP system using FlowRoute in the back end. And it's just so fluid. Instead of having to do a phone bridge or a software bridge or anything like that to get it into Unity, in and out of Unity.
And you can send Dante to it as well, or only NDI?
If you're on Prem, yes, you can. That's another big plus on it too is if I have so we have VCOM in the cloud, but we also have VCOM on the ground. There's a program that can run on the ground along with just the server. Whereas to get Dante in and out of Unity, you have to have that server on-prem with you, or you have to use their Unity Connect in order to send audio back and forth. With VCOM is there's an external program called VDI. It's a virtual device interface. It's their program that ties to their frame. And so that program can run on a computer, and I can send in 8 different audio channels off my comm system. And those could be two-way also without any other interface. Whereas if I was using Unity, for me to get to my 4 PLs that I normally run in my truck, those 4 PLs, I'd have to have 2 machines, and each machine would have to run 2 different clients. I'd run one not web, what do they call it? Touch client, and then could use them PCs, a touch client, and then their regular client. And then I would assign Dante into that. The VDI program from VCOM is just pick your channels, patch your channels in Dante, and it's in the cloud at that point, or it's in their infrastructure at that point. So it's a lot easier to implement and integrate with other comm systems, especially if you're using Dante. Greg, you've been quiet. Are you ever going to get into this world?
And you question that? Wow. Well, no, I mean, most people say, we need the Unity in the cloud because it's the only way you can get to it easily. I solved that by just putting zero tier on my server, and I travel with like 6 handsets to go with it. So they're already on my zero tier network. So as long as they have internet, doesn't matter. Wi-Fi, plug it into a cable. They get it off of LTE because those all have SIM cards too. It doesn't matter. Just, zero tier finds this server and away you go. And then it sits right next to me. It Dante's right into the truck. Bada boom, bada bing. It all fits in my backpack. Gotta love it.
So running the Mac Mini on-prem and then zero tier to get into it.
Yeah, because almost every truck I'm in lately has Dante.
Yeah.
The Atom's got an Omnio card in it, so it's on the Dante network. So a couple of mouse clicks, and I can have 6, Atom ports, whether they be IFB, PLs, or just point-to-points. And boom, they're in Unity. Have a nice day. Hand out a couple of phones to like my A2s or something, and that's basically where we use it. It shows I know, like Masters. I'm there 3 days before BSI shows up with any radio stuff.
Oh, okay.
And we're not allowed to have cell phones per se. But when you put a big ugly headset on it and say, well, it's not a cell phone, it's an intercom box, then nobody questions it. So even though it looks like a cell phone. They're touchy about that in Augusta.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, I remember you talking about
that.
Well,
they're not as bad now because they let the patrons take cell phones on the course. But Augusta National used to be a no cell phone zone, period. It didn't matter who you were. There's a great story about an EIC CBS years ago, went out to fix a camera, got the side down, a couple boards out, and he's on his phone back to the truck, and green jacket climbs up the ladder. Excuse me, sir, you need to come with me. They ejected him. He's on the blacklist. He'll never work Masters ever again unless he goes to somebody else.
Wow.
They can be difficult.
It's just so hard to understand.
Hey, their place, their rules,
Yeah.
So, and they've gotten a lot better about it. And like, you can have phones out at the studio building now. But like, if you're walking around the driving range, being the A2 on, like, say, the Drive Chip and Putt show or something like that, no, sorry. If it's not a official device, and we get stickers. So I get stickers for my intercom things. NBC is cool enough to provide me with 6 of those for my handhelds. So as long as I get the stickers on them, the green coats are.
What are you using for handhelds? Are you using the those rugged ones, the Sun?
No, they're just little cheapy Samsungs I bought for like $100-something a piece. I think it's the A series, AO2s or something. They had them on Black Friday special. They were like $109 brand new. So.
There's one that starts with an S. I can't remember the top of my head. And I was looking at buying those because it actually runs Android.
No, that's what is it? Sonum? Yeah, the XP8s. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those are cool. I mean, they're rugged, and the cool thing about those is they have a nice on the side of the handset. They have a nice push to talk button.
Yeah.
So it works
like
really
a radio,
well.
more similar to a radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was looking at and actually looking at those for quite a while, and then we just stopped using those because we got into the Dante comms more so, and now we're coming backwards. We're still using our Dante comms, but we're still needing more remote people tied in.
So I use that same setup on some of the corporate stuff I do too, because we don't have radios or they're not interfaced to the intercom. So we do the same thing, and the zero tier totally made that work for me. And I've only had reports. Who's that guy, Richard Turner, down in I think he's in Alabama. He works at a school, and he can't get zero tier to work on the school network. They're blocking something. And
Yeah, I've ran into that.
last time I was out at Cedar Sinai on a medical thing, this has been several years ago, but it wouldn't work there either.
Yeah.
Medical places are extremely locked down. So,
Yeah, I've
but
noticed that on several of the VPN options, and I want to bring that up because that is something I've ran into on the cloud side. I was like, oh, I'll dial in and I'll get into my infrastructure. I couldn't do it, and so I was, and it was NDI Cloud was what I was trying to implement, and they're like, oh, we don't have anything blocked. The famous, infamous IT. I was like, well, no, we
you're
don't
the
have
first
anything
person that's
blocked.
ever had a problem.
Yeah, we don't block anything here. I'm like, look, dude, you've got something blocked because I can't get out. I can't be seen. And he goes, no, you're on oh, wait a second. Oh, hold on a second. That was Winston-Salem. And that came back to me a little later and at the Wake Forest University. And it came back a little later. And it's like, oh, I think you could try it now. Let's see if it works now. I might have had a switch turned the different way.
Well, how about that thing we did out at Tahoe a couple years ago? Those guys, they were 2 days in getting us an open port.
Yep.
2 whole days.
Yeah.
Oh, what a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand security and all that, but it sure does hurt whenever you expected things to work so you can do testing in your own side.
Do you carry like a bonded router with you just in case you can't get through? Like they block tunneling or whatever.
PEP links, and our PEP link routers have saved our bacon a couple times now for that exact reason. Nate, is I was like, look, I'm just not going to use them, and I could tell that traffic to go different directions. So these computers are just going to use these IP addresses are just going to use these bonded modems. So I'm using the cellular modems or the Starlink at that point, and that's all that traffic is just talk out that. So I'm talking to my cloud through those modems, but my internet for the streams that we were sending out was on the hard lines because that would go out. But for my control side, I couldn't get my control side to work, so I sent it out the cellular side. And since it's cellulars, it's bonded, it's a little more latent, but it's still not as bad. It's better than nothing, which is what I had.
Well, and sometimes non-bonded works. I mean, how many times does this little box save my butt? It's not bonded.
Yeah.
I have those bonded to my bonded. Does Starlink add a lot more latency because it's bouncing off a satellite?
Yes, there is more latency.
So before I say anything, I know you have very large hands, but is that a really small Coke can that you were just drinking from?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not insane. And this is one thing I use cloud stuff for all the time, is to get outside of our IT limitations within our building here, because I'm on the same network as our software developers and stuff like that, and they got to protect all of their knowledge, their IP, if you will. And so that is one reason I use a lot of cloud things, is basically to get outside of our wall so that I can actually do things that I need to.
So how much editing are you? I know you edit, Lenny. How much editing are you doing in the cloud?
None
at all.
I just get the data here. It's just I mean, all of our stuff is usually done within our networks, in our offices or whatever, wherever they may be in the world, and they end up on my NAS, my big network attached server or storage, and it may take a day to get there, but I don't usually have that fast of turnarounds. So 2 or 3 days I can usually work with it. And within our building here, like SRT signals can't get out or it's weird. So, but the second I put it on my cloud version, everybody gets it. So it's just, again, the security of our building, something you were saying, and it's easier for me to spin that up, get everything running, than to put in an IT ticket to get anything done. So
Well, I have to
sometimes we have to
say,
work our way around things.
yeah,
But I will have to say one thing: you're talking about these, put together solutions, all these different interfaces and things working together. Working for a manufacturer of some of these things, or developer of some of these things, supporting this stuff is getting very complicated, because we do sell support contracts and things like that with our solutions, and therefore, when we have to train our support people to answer these questions, and this is becoming more complicated as these solutions, that everybody's out there putting together, become more dynamic and change. And we added this thing, we added that thing, we have no idea what's going to happen. So there is some issues there. These growing pains, obviously, from an established workflow to something completely new.
sure.
And then the last thing I was going to say, there's one other thing I want to say. Oh, this is something I still have, is this signal anxiety, if you will. I know when I plug a cable in, I'm going to get pictures, and I know why it's not going to be there if it's not there.
Right.
All of that has logic. I mean, I call it signal anxiety. I don't know what the technical term is, but when something's not ending up where it's supposed to be, I don't know. You can't see the gray hair, but I do get a lot of it because of that little stuff, and it's just hard sometimes. And you got 20, you're the producer, you're whatever, you're in charge. You've got 20 people asking you, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? And deadlines are coming. And I don't know. I had one thing go really bad to the point where they didn't want to use it at all anymore. And obviously, as that was sort of on the side as a private thing, but obviously our business is pivoting very strong towards
Sure.
cloud-based solutions. So we do see the value there. We do see the opportunity there, but that's something I still personally have issues with. Is like, all right, why isn't it getting there? What did I enter a number wrong? Is it
Right.
there's 30 things along the signal chain that could have possibly gone wrong.
I think it's good. It's just as simple as, I mean, to me, it's just as simple as chasing down a cable. If you know a cable's plugged in, you're agreed, you can see it. But it's a matter of that mental thing of, okay, if this doesn't work, it's this, it's that. It's just a retraining of that to be able to troubleshoot it fast enough. Having the tools like we talked about last week, where like Bo showed these great tools, and his multiviewers being able to see, switches on and off, seeing ports on and off, things like that. Those are just tools that we're not used to using that are going to help us know. And I don't know, maybe you could look at it on the same way as, like, I could look at a router and see if there's a signal going into it. It's the same thing for video. If it's plugged in or not, that's kind of the same concept. I do find it interesting to see the pushback from so many people sometimes, and I don't get it. I mean, I guess I'm comfortable with it. But I do understand what you're saying, though, about being able to chase it down to, there's the problem, it's not plugged in. um I don't know an answer to that, of how to make it better. I wish I did. I maybe do better. What about you, Nate? I know you kind of bounce around on some different things here and there. Mostly on-prem type production. Have you played with anything in the cloud at all?
Yeah, we built we were doing a show with one of my partners I work with a lot. We've done a few shows in the cloud, mostly vMixed with Zoom machines. And we found we didn't find any huge advantage to it. We're still waiting to see the wow whiz bang thing, but it was more of a, this would be cool to try it. We want to just get it to work. And we ended up, the client sent us a video file that was something corrupt with it, and it crashed the entire thing, even the Zoom machines. I don't know how that worked, but
Ooh.
every time we'd play the video, the whole thing went down, and we ended up having to do that show local. But we tried it a few more times. I haven't done anything huge with it, but I'm not like against it, and like setting everything up isn't too much harder than building a computer, but there's a little stuff to learn about. I need to know how I can quickly spin up different things in different areas. So like if I built my whole setup at a server in New York and I wanted to do a show in Japan, how could I get that whole same build set up without having to start the build process all over again? Is there any way to transfer that
Yeah, actually there
other?
is. In AWS, it's just you make a clone of that instance, or as they
Okay.
call it, a snapshot. So
Yeah,
you
I
make a
haven't
clone of
used
that
it in a
instance,
while, so
and then you just transfer it over to that other VPC. And
okay.
the IP addresses are kind of irrelevant, but you could have things that will help you in that. You could just reassign an elastic IP, so a static IP to it, to be able to get to it if you say if you're in Japan.
It's almost like an image of your
It's
computer.
just like
and
imaging a computer. It's exactly like that.
you just have to tweak all the IP addresses and stuff once you get
Yeah.
it set up.
Yeah. So your IP addresses, your destination IP addresses will be different. The one other thing too that you could do is you could actually use FQDN. So you could use a domain name that's
Yeah.
that is going to be related to that machine. So say for instance, right now, I think, yeah, it's on. If you went to Pizzazz, so I'll put it in the address here. Control C, put this in the chat. So
The other thing I'd be curious about, since it's been a while since the last time I played with it, is like, is there new solutions for like before it was a Zoom pinning machine in the clouds? I'm sure there's other stuff that's like Zoom ISO that we could use now.
Zoom rooms. Zoom rooms
Zoom
is
room.
the way to do it. The easiest way to do it is Zoom rooms in the cloud right now. And
Yeah.
you get 4 or 6 NDI feeds directly off of that, I believe it is. I
So you
usually
just build
use
a
it
few of
right
those.
before. Yeah. So if you went to that domain that I put in the script, and if you went to that, you could use that free MyIP. So it's a free thing. So you just go to freemyip.com, you type in whatever domain name you want, and then you copy that address, you drop that in your browser, and then when you put it into your startup script, so when it starts the browser, your machine starts and you start that browser, it calls out and says, hey, I'm over here at this public IP address. And then you could always use that address. So I have one that I made up that was just simple, and it redirects all my traffic for calls. And so I had Pizzazz calls and then .freemyip.com. So that address always pointed at my input for calls. And so that's one way of not getting around the IP address, having to send people a list of IP addresses to go to for machines. Now, if you're only talking about 2 or 3 machines, it's probably not a big deal. Or if you're you're talking about people that are fluent, that's one other thing too. But if you need something that people can understand and remember, then you can use something like that FreeMyIP to be able to give them something that's not a technical number.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff I've been working on lately is when we do a lot of multi-site production where there's a camera team or a whole production crew on site in different locations. And a lot of that's just SRT back and forth or two vMix machines talking to each other.
Right.
Simple stuff like that. It's really easy, but eventually we're going to want to be doing more complicated stuff. And that's why I think I need to get more into this type of stuff, but I haven't seen like the big wow whiz bang part of it yet, except for maybe lower latency and stuff like that. But I've done shows in Switzerland on my local PC, so it's not like
I would
it wasn't
say
any issue. But yeah,
I have less wow whiz bang anymore because I've been doing it for so. I mean, I've been doing this I've been working in cloud for 6 years now, almost 7. I've been on Amazon longer than that, doing wowza servers and stuff, but actually literally pushing the production into the cloud, we've been doing for at least 5 or 6 years whenever we started doing tennis and all that. I think that the biggest advantage that I point this out to everyone is that redundancy that you can build in the cloud so much faster and so much easier than building redundancy on the ground. That's probably the biggest advantage. And whenever you're talking about wow whiz bang type things that are just going to set you crazy, I had a client, his name is Josh also, he's in the North Carolina mountains somewhere, and literally moved out of a larger city, moved onto this mountain. All they had was cellular service out there, but he still needed to be able to run his business, which was production. And this was during COVID, and that's what we set him up. It's like, I can't have all these. He kept trying to use um, his bonded cellular to be able to bring in and do his vmix shows there. I was like, well, look, we can set you up in the cloud. He could drop off, and his partner that was in another city in another state could just jump right in and pick up. And that's the biggest thing that I
Yeah.
find, that having that backup instantly available. Somebody else is watching over your back. You don't miss a beat. Everything's there. And that's probably the biggest thing that I'll keep going back to, is like, you have that redundancy and you can build redundancy in it.
With the TriCaster and this Vector version, can you custom build your own server like you can with vMix, or do you just use their setup and it's kind of like a built box that's already ready to go?
Well, with TriCaster now, they already have everything's pre-configured. It is super easy to, you start it up, you spin it up, you use the system. With VizVector, we're building in our own VPC, so it's similar to like what you would do with vMix. It's like you have to build up a G4DN 2X or 4XL. I use a 4XL on ours, and then it's the same after that. You know, once I have this machine built, it's built. All it has to do is call out and do the license, and that's it.
So is there any way to do more of a hybrid show, so you have maybe a TriCaster on the ground and have that interface with your SDI inputs with stuff that's in the cloud, or they don't have a direct way to do?
You'd probably
Like, how do you
bring it
get your
down by
physical
SRT.
inputs?
You
Okay.
would probably bring it SRT down. If you had content in the cloud, you'd bring it down by SRT, or NDI Cloud, or NDI Bridge. That's another NDI Cloud, Sienna Cloud, same.
So just do it the way we're already doing it.
Yeah.
But there's no like direct interface with a TriCaster software update or something where it would work with the cloud setup.
Now you're still having to use the same common protocols that everybody's using, which is about 4. So it's not a whole lot that are useful. The WebRTC or WebWeb is definitely coming along really fast. And not only we're using that in our multi-viewer back, but there's ways to get that into it. I'm working with Nimble right now on our cloud stack here, because I'm building our own private cloud to deploy here at the office, and just to give us a little more time on it. And that would be where we use Nimble to bring in the NDI source, and we flip it back to WEP and be able to send that as a multi-view. But I could also bring in people by SRT, flip it over to WEP, or I could bring in people by WEP and have them come over WebRTC and send it out NDI. So it's just another tool of that. So the Nimble server is definitely something you want to put on your list to
Nimble.
look into. Yeah.
Is there a preferred codec you're using with your SRT feeds?
H.264 for the most part. Yeah. I don't really have anything preferred on SRT myself. And mostly 264 because that's what my Matrox boxes use.
Okay, I was just wondering if you mess with like HVAC or AV1 or anything like that. I know no hardware encoders do AV1 yet. But
yeah, no, I haven't messed with that at all. No, I do have, actually, I think I have 2 encoders from Magewell that do 265. But I still I end up on 264 most of the time, because I find it the most compatible with any of the software decoders and hardware decoders both. It's just,
yeah, that's been around since all this stuff even started, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And like people are like, oh, you're using the bandwidth. It's like, I don't care. It's not enough to worry about. It's like, but you could do so much lower bandwidth with HEVC or 265. I'm like, don't care. It's like, I'll just crank it up to 15 and don't worry about it. But it depends what your needs are. So, wow, we rolled through that hour. Anybody got anything else to join in? I'm going to go ahead and finish up for the day. Oh, hey, Bo.
Hey, I just want to quickly, since Greg's here, he's got a Carbonite. My paycheck might not clear next month if I didn't mention. So Ross has their Graphite CPC,
that was it.
which
I
is the
forgot
cloud
about it.
version.
Yeah.
And essentially it is a Carbonite and an expression kind of slammed in one box that runs on a Windows instance. So it's a decent option. I mean, it's an NDI, based
Is that the
thing.
cloud demo they were doing at NAB last year?
Yep. So you can
'Cause
connect it
I
to
just
hardware
looked over
panels.
shoulders and I was really impressed at how fast it was.
Yeah. So it's because all you're doing is controlling the Windows box over IP, and then you're getting WebRTC multi-viewers back.
Yeah, no, but they're doing a
Um,
cut and I'm watching him hit the button on the Surface
No,
and then I'm
it's
watching the
pretty
multi-viewer change.
magical.
It's the fastest remote
It's pretty
setup that
magical to
I'd
have
seen so far.
to take your physical touch drive panel and control the switcher in AWS, and it feels like you're at the switcher. It's, and I'm sure, Jeff, you probably get that with the Scarhoy stuff too.
I'm now remoting my touch drive to my Carbonite frame. I have that worked out. Works really well.
Yeah.
That's fast too.
So it's
Is there a
Um,
demo so you could learn how to use it? I have a Carbonite right now that I'm using to learn on, but I have to give it back eventually. But I'm just getting better at your interface and like your software.
yeah. I mean, the
There's a
interface
car-
can definitely be clunky at first. Like
The
you
soft
definitely have
pan-
to
they need to
poke
the soft
around
panel
it.
still works like a Carbonite. We're all using ultras. It's like, where's the
Yeah.
ultra soft panel?
Yeah,
Right,
Greg showed
right.
me. I highly recommend Greg if you ever want to get some training on a Carbonite, because I couldn't get my head around anything, and he showed me a few little things, and then it just snapped, and like now I'm off
2
and
hours
running.
with me is worth about 6 weeks of watching YouTube videos.
Yeah, like I didn't get anything
Not to brag.
from it. Yeah,
Not that there's only like 4 YouTube videos out there too.
No. There's a lot. There's quite a few. And some of the Ross videos I take issue with because let's show you how to do this and press this and press this and press this. And you never see program to see what happened. It's like,
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't have
they
the
could
touch
use a lot of
drive,
help.
so it's even harder.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely happy to help anybody who wants to log in. I have a physical Carbonite here in my lab. I have access to a cloud Carbonite, so I'm happy to help anybody
That'd
poke
be
around.
great.
At
Maybe
any
we could do
time.
that. Maybe we could set that up. Maybe in a week's coming or something like
No,
that. Rob.
we
That'd
should
be
do
good
it like
show.
you guys did the Viz RT Surface a couple of
Yeah.
shows ago. We should do that with the touch
I
drive.
love the idea of being able
I
to
have a
see
touch
different
drive.
stuff.
I know, Greg, your touch drive is probably bigger. Mine is only just
Yeah,
it's the one
I have
RU
a
compact, or the
TD2S
one.
and it's dead
Yeah, I
right
have the
now, by the
compact.
way.
Uh-oh.
My replacement was supposed to be here today, but it's stranded in a snowy New Jersey, according to FedEx. But it's on the
That's a bummer.
way. And that's something else I'll say about Ross. I mean, their support has been excellent because it crashed this summer and then
Good.
it crashed again. And they were like, what? It happened before? And I'm like, yeah, they look it up and they're like, oh, this is twice. We're sending you a new one. I didn't even ask. It's like,
Yeah.
boom. So
It's good.
I'm very
That's
impressed with
good.
that.
That's awesome.
The other
And it-
thing, the other thing I did want to mention, because somebody was asking, maybe Nate, somebody was asking about physical hardware, physical SDI connections, and then operating remotely. So that's easy to do with the raw stuff as well. So like I could remote into Greg's Carbonite. If he's running an on-prem show, I could connect my panel to his show, or I can just pull up his dashboard, touchscreen panel and cut the show from my house. Just team viewer it into a dashboard computer on his network or something. So there's a lot of ways to skin that cat.
We're gonna kind of mess with that tomorrow. So if you want to set us up or tell us what ports to open, we could set something up for you to log in, and we could try it next week or something.
And I do have one little minor
Yeah.
aggravation with that right now. Dashboard doesn't work going through port forwards. And I don't know if it's because I'm using a 5G modem on the one end or what, but I can't get the tree to populate. I can see the frame.
Yeah, hit me up
switcher.
offline. There's a bunch of
Yeah,
there's a
okay.
bunch of ports that there's a bunch of the non-standard ports for you to populate all of the OGPL stuff.
Yeah, but even
or
on a
OG,
VPN, it
VMO.
does the same thing. So I'm like, is this me being stupid or what? So yeah, I
And
will
then
hit you up.
if there's a lot going on your dashboards, you can use the dashboard proxy thing, so you can just tell it what
Yeah, it does the
things
same
to.
thing in proxy too, which is
Alright.
weird.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a look. I'm not the expert in that particular area, but I'd be
Yeah,
happy
well,
to.
Ross was stumped today too. I called them about that
All
thing,
right.
and they were like,
Well, if they can't
yeah.
fix it, I may or may not be able to help.
Well,
Yeah,
I
no worries.
stumped somebody too today. I called my 45 drives. I had a support call with them. It's like, hey, I want to do this and this and this with some virtual machines in there. Oh, this is on one of our servers back there. And like, oh, Let me see if anybody here knows how to do that. I'm like, but it's your machines. What do you mean? Wait a second. Why am I trying to do something that you actually have in the software and nobody knows how to do it? I was like, yeah, nobody here does that. It just happens to be there. Oh, great. So I wasted 2 days going down that path. Yay. Getting it back. But thanks, Bo, for that. I definitely want to take you up on that because I actually I never got a demo of the graphite, and I'd like to see that, to see how things are looking there. I am aware of the product and all, but I definitely want to put some hands on it and kind of see the differences around it. So maybe in the next couple of weeks or so, we can set up something and go into your virtual machine and kind of poke around and stuff and get everybody a good view on it. Cause that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Is be able to see other stuff and see how other people are doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't used my graphite instance, in like a mission critical situation. So, but I'd be happy to, all that to say, it might take me a little bit to like set up a show in front of you and show you everything. But it's super powerful as far as, it's kind of limited on IO. I think you get 2 multi-viewers, you get like 18 inputs, something like that. So it's not quite as big, I think, as the vector stuff.
Right.
But you do have, I think, like 2 or 4 full channels of expression. So that's super powerful. So yeah, there's a lot we can look at.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. Well, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up for today, and appreciate you all for joining, and appreciate you coming by, and we'll definitely see you next week.